A couple of days ago, I got an Apple Watch, and honestly, I must say it has really made my life easier. I don't need to take out my wallet, I can pay with my Apple Watch. I don't need to answer texts. My Apple Watch gives me suggested replies. At the gym, if I go swimming, I don't need to count laps, my watch does it for me. And none of this is necessarily a bad thing. At least, it shouldn't be. But part of me starts to wonder if it has the potential to become a bad thing. All of this convenience given to us makes life feel seamless and effortless, but at what cost? After all, there must be a price, right? As far as I hear, the brain is just like a muscle, and not working it out will cause it to atrophy. If getting a new device like an Apple Watch makes your life suddenly feel easier, then perhaps that means you're exerting less mental effort into day to day tasks. Every year, I find that the average person generally does less and less deep and critical thinking. Everything has been automated, even in many professional careers. In the modern day, many professions that I used to admire as something that seemed incomprehensibly difficult suddenly don't seem so difficult once the curtain is pulled back and the professionals tell me something along the lines of, well, basically, we just input everything into this machine or this software, and it does all these heavy calculations that your grandfather used to do. And the machine gives us the neat little desired output here. Now, don't get me wrong, these professions are still admirable and impressive to me, but in some way, computers doing the bulk of most of our work makes it feel like, in some ways, the bar has been lowered for all of us, no matter what career we reside in. Whether people want to hear it or not, everything has become easier because of computer automation to the point where someone in a professional career of today is probably using their brain as much as an average person in the 70s or and an average person, a security guard, for example, of today, is probably using their brain as much as a 12-year-old boy in the 70s. Reading novels that detail the intelligence of young children from times before computers definitely doesn't help with this sentiment either. Oftentimes, in books like Tom Sawyer, for example, I'm vexed at the fact that the standards expected of a 12-year-old boy are higher than most 25-year-olds nowadays. Some of these people really seem like they can't cope with living life with technology, even with te- even with technology to help them. I mean, just imagine if you plopped them into Tom Sawyer's world in Tom Sawyer's time period and then took away all the technology they're used to having at their fingertips. I'm sure they would probably just pass away. Meanwhile, since it was written, readers easily maintain their suspension of disbelief reading about a 12-year-old boy from the 1830s who was able to explore caves on his own, run away to be a pirate, and go on various adventures and quests while getting his survival needs met, all without any phone or internet or form of navigation. Yes, a 12-year-old boy from the 1830s 100% has more survival skills without a phone than the majority of us. But to go back to what I was saying, I still have high levels of admiration for professionals with advanced careers today, but if I'm being brutally honest, and probably a bit offensive, I'm not as impressed with professionals today as I am of professionals from the time before computers, specifically the early 70s through the early 2000s. Now, why is that? That would be because in this time period, professionals in complex fields had to be remarkably brilliant because it was a rare time period in which computers did in fact exist and computer calculations were exponentially expanding. At the same time, the field of math, science, and technology, but there was still practically no technological outsourcing and convenience to match it like there is today. Jobs and careers didn't have their convenient suite of software for every possible human task like they do today, and more importantly, for much of this time, you couldn't just look something up on Google, ask ChatGPT, or use forums to find someone else's solution to your problem. In this time period, college had more value because it was exceedingly difficult. Students weren't handled with kid gloves. There were no second chances at failing, and almost everybody that wasn't exceedingly and incomprehensibly brilliant actually had to read the textbook. There was no iPad to take your notes on, automatically keeping all of your notes in one place and organizing them by keywords. Tests and projects were often ridiculously difficult, and most importantly, professionals in their career, due to actually reading the textbooks and needing to understand it on a deep level, along with their critical thinking skills, as well as needing to explain things in depth in exams, really understood most of the processes involved in their jobs. Nowadays, many people simply don't have the same depth of understanding in their field that professionals of a different time period did. And there's a reason for this. They can explain most elements of their field, but once it gets to the point at which their job is automated with either software or a machine or even AI, they no longer can explain the intricacies of this. And honestly, they don't really need to, and it's infeasible to. This is because automation takes over almost all jobs, and it's not feasible or realistic to teach everybody in university how computer or software works, because then they would just be a computer science major as well. Even with computer science majors, however, I've come to find out that it is incomprehensible to teach somebody everything about how computers work on a truly fundamental and complicated level, as well as a modern one. So many important aspects of the fundamental parts are glossed over and forgotten about. Compare that with a college student in the 80s, though, and you'll start to understand why I think that they were some of the smartest professionals. Computer science in that time actually meant computer science, and truly learning computing at its full range of depth was still doable back then, but was just on the verge of complete infeasibility. One problem that plagues modern critical thought is the fact that the bar for college has been lowered so much that it might as well be a high school diploma in today's day and age. Essays, which are some of the best ways for developing critical thought, are often outsourced to AI. And what's worse is that many professors encourage the use of AI for research, outlining, writing, and brainstorming. Ultimately, this is the wrong choice, however, because research, outlining, and brainstorming are all skills that build critical thought. And in my opinion, if you're not learning critical thought in college, there's no reason to be going to college to begin with. All things considered, in my estimation, it's my personal estimation that 95% of modern college students wouldn't pass college in the 60s through 90s if they were plopped into it with no technology, internet, or AI to use. That being said, with all of this in our recent memory, we can now come to the realization that jobs don't pay as much anymore because computers and automation have lowered the barrier of entry for almost every career, no matter how advanced it is. For example, have you ever gotten hired for a job thinking that there are going to be far higher standards than they actually have, only to find out that they use some type of software, avoid critical, difficult, and meticulous thought at all costs, and or automate everything that they can? I can't be the only one who finds it disappointing, right? Here's a good example of exactly what I mean. I'm a writer, and I love writing as well as ideas. That is, I love ideas in and of themselves. Ideas are a currency to me, and having a personal notebook of them genuinely makes me feel more rich than having money does. That being said, as a creative person, my favorite thing to do is to talk about ideas in a type of brainstorming session around a table with other people who love to do the same thing. Brainstorming doesn't always have to be boring either. The best type of brainstorming is a form of play where two or more people get together and build a world together, one upping each other, using natural human competition to their advantage in crafting the funniest possible comedy bits. This is how I imagine creative genius such as Monty Python, Airplane, or even something as simple as Doritos ads back when they were funny were being created. Just a team of writers or humans thinking in a human way, basing their jokes off of real human experience, and having no consideration for the chronically online, chronically offended types whose main goal is to sabotage comedy and happiness altogether. That being said, I've heard plenty of accounts of people who've gotten hired to a marketing agency or a creative agency expecting to join a vibrant team of writers, only to find that there is only one person at the corporation, only one other writer at the corporation, and that they are encouraged to both use AI to do the work of many people with only one. In fact, in most of these accounts that I've both read and heard firsthand, the employees in these types of positions are encouraged to use AI to come up with ideas, write for them, and brainstorm for them. Which, at that point, I think, what is the point of hiring a writer? At that point, you no longer have a writer, but a content curator or perhaps a AI prompter of sorts. The bar has been severely lowered by automation, and if you think about it, it makes sense that they no longer feel the need to pay professionals to do skilled labor. Ultimately, if the company has lowered its standards so much that it no longer cares about the attention to detail of human craftsmanship, then what it's asking for when hiring really isn't all worth all that much, now is it? This automation and computer outsourcing, whether AI or not, has lowered the barrier to entry so much that has made nearly everyone more much more replaceable than they otherwise would have been in the past. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about specific jobs being automated here. That's a separate topic. What I'm personally talking about is technology in general causing a rising tide of ease and convenience, as well as outsourcing of critical thought that devalues all of our jobs, no matter what industry we're in. Sure, you could argue that that isn't a bad thing, and I agree, it's not necessarily bad. I guess ultimately it's just kind of bittersweet. Even for a physical job such as landscaping, this effect happens. Every once in a while, a new tool comes along that uses advanced technology to lower the barrier of entry to in doing a job that involves skill that would often take years to learn, leaving someone who used to pride themselves in the time it took to learn that skill and the increase in pay and value, perception of value that they got for it, feeling less valuable about themselves and ultimately more replaceable. Yes, automation is normal, but the real question is where does it end and what does society do when the vast majority of it no longer has work to do? This lack of critical thinking can even be seen in YouTube channels. Like I've said, I used to work for a very big YouTube channel as a writer. What was most remarkable to me that the D-bag wannabe entrepreneur guru who owned the channel was completely incapable of understanding why certain videos did better than others. When I wrote a smash hit called The Craziest Drugs You've Never Heard of, he genuinely thought that the only successful aspect of the series was the idea itself, and not the years of research that I'd already put into the topic. Before I'd worked on his channel, he put zero critical thinking into his videos. All he contributed to was thinking of an idea, which I'll admit he was very good at. Then he'd tell his virtual assistant to generate some basic bullet points about the topic of the video using AI, which scraped other people's hard work and writing from their YouTube videos. To this day, this guy has not broken through the record of subscribers earned in one video as well as views from one video that my writing set for that video. And he still doesn't understand that it wasn't just the good idea, it was the combination of a good idea and mind-numbing, in-depth research and critical thinking that was immensely difficult and painstaking. The script I wrote was a result of numerous processes and prioritizations in my head, logical decisions trees, holding on to a thought and researching forums for 30 minutes just to find the answer to it, writing the beginning, middle, and end simultaneously with different levels of knowledge at different points of writing it, and painstakingly tying them together, keeping track of over 100 different tabs full of research points. And I'm not exaggerating. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but this is the type of work that is 100% transformative and original because that's what it takes to make truly original stuff. That gets copied by This is the type of work that gets copied by multiple other YouTubers, gets scraped by AI, and ultimately gets fed into an AI model in an attempt to replace it. But the truth is, a weak brain incapable of critical thought can't comprehend the complexity of intellectual, multi-layered work that you metaphorically break your back over. When the video I wrote did better than ever before, I never ever got I never even got a single thank you for my contribution. Instead, I was told to output more, to start making 2 scripts per week when writing the first was immensely mentally exhausting to begin with. This is how someone incapable of complex thought thinks. This is a person who's outsourced so much of their life to technology and other people that they're incapable of even understanding why good work is good. If you ask me, you ought to avoid these types of exploitative people at all costs. Stop outsourcing your mind to your phone, to an app, or to technology. When you stop needing to think, you stop living your life. Challenges and difficulties are what make us feel alive. Excess difficulty makes for a smooth and frictionless life, but we don't remember frictionless, we remember friction. We remember difficulties in overcoming them. Sometimes I wonder if I felt more alive when I was a kid and a teenager because I didn't rely on a smartphone to do nearly everything for me. If we outsource all of our critical thought to a different form of computer, that is, one made of silicone, what ends up being left of us? And more importantly, where is the logical end to this? Will civilization reverse itself sooner or later because it has realized that the mass idiocracy we've eventually created is no longer sustainable? What's more is what's going to happen to the archetypal human when the brain machine interface becomes standard? If the effects have already been bad enough with smartphones, brain machine interfaces will probably render us utterly unrecognizable from an unmodified human of just 50 years ago. On top of that, what happens when technology, interface or not, succeeds in outsourcing almost all of our thought and decision making? What will a human even look like anymore? And more importantly, who will be making our decisions, dictating our opinions, and influencing our actions? Well, regardless, that's the topic for another video.